Exhibit A of awkwardness. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Tara East. I'm a writer, blogger, YouTuber, and the author of the mystery novel Every Time He Dies. But in this week's episode, I'm actually going to be interviewing my friend Shayla Morgansen. Shayla is generous, sweet, and incredibly hardworking. Shayla is also a PhD candidate and a sessional academic at the university where she's completing her dissertation. And in today's interview, we're going to be talking a little bit about her latest novel, Fractured, which is part of the Elmstone saga. Enjoy. Hi, Shayla. Thanks for being here today and for agreeing to this interview. I'm pretty excited. So the first thing I want to do is, obviously I know who you are, but just in case other people don't, could you give a brief introduction of who you are, what you're about, and the types of books that you write?
Yeah, so I'm Shayla Morgansen, and I'm a fantasy and speculative fiction author. My series, The Elmstone Saga, is pitched at an older YA urban fantasy audience, although it's managed to attract readers that fall well outside of my target readership, probably because of some of the themes that I deal with around censorship and free speech and found families.
Do you feel like found family is one of your themes or something that, they always talk about how writers have particular topics or ideas that they're just revisiting over and over and over again? Do you feel like that's one of yours, or it's just more an element of this particular series?
No, it definitely is. I have realized when I kind of analyze uh, my writing career or the things that I've explored in other stories and stories that are upcoming, that found families is definitely one of my go-to themes. It's something that I must be trying to uh, write through or understand uh, through my writing experience, I suppose.
I know that our writing routines change a lot over time, and you've been writing for a long time now as well. So I'd really like to hear, what does your writing routine look like right now?
Okay, so I'm like a binger actually
Yeah.
in all things. So I've tried to adapt my writing routine to what my life looks like now. In that, in the past, like when I was a school student or doing my undergraduate degree, I was I would tend to save my summer holidays for writing, and basically for 3 months, I would just turn up at the keyboard every day and just write until I couldn't look at the screen anymore and have carpal tunnel and RSI.
Yeah.
And now I have to like carve out blocks of time. So my writing routine is generally I try and save Sundays just for writing and leisure. And throughout the week, I try and use like my walks or yoga when I'm supposed to be cleansing out my mind and just thinking of nothing. I'm really just visualizing scenes that I'm going to write on Sunday.
Oh, I like that. So you're not necessarily writing a strict outline or doing a plan, but you're more like, as you're writing, visualizing what's going to come next. So is
kind
that sort
of,
of how it works?
sort of. I do plan. Like I suppose when people talk about their writing style, I guess I'm planter. Like
Yeah.
I don't just sit down and just come up with it on the spot, although that does happen at times. Like there is like a channeling at times, but I also don't plan out every single detail. Otherwise, I feel like I lose the joy of discovering things as I write. So I plan out the major events. I've started to get a lot out of scene cards where
Ah.
I I still visualize for a long time and know what scenes I want to write. And then I put all of those onto scene cards, lay them all out on the ground, and place them where I think in the story they're going to need to be. Like really deeply emotional scenes between characters. I don't want them at the beginning of the story because they're not as meaningful. So I want them past the 50% mark. And there's some scenes that might be like inciting events. I want them in the first half. So I kind of map it out and then see where the gaps are, and then either sit down and write to those points and see where the characters take me, or nut out what's missing from there, like what is required to get me to those high emotional points or high suspense moments.
And do you do this sort of like mapping out with the scene cards? Do you do that before you begin even working on the novel proper? Or is this something you're sort of doing maybe during an exploratory or first draft phase?
Yeah, usually at that phase, like I want to, most stories that I begin, my current series is a little bit different because I'm nearly on to book 6.
So amazing.
Which is the last book in the saga, and I kind of know a lot of where I'm going, so a lot of the setup's been done. Whereas with new stories, I want to start off with that spark. So I don't want to come away from the writing and do the planning, otherwise I may never sit down and start. So generally with a new story, I will get some spark. I'll start visualizing while I'm out for walks. I'll start reading articles about that setting, or about, often my stories are a fantasy. So I'll start looking around like mythological lore or something that will give me a bit of information that I can attach my ideas to. And then I'll just sit down and write until I run out of ideas, which might be 2 or 3 chapters. And then I'll go away and work out, like, now that I know who these characters are and I've put them in this situation, what do I want out of it, or where do I see this going? And then start my planning from there.
That's interesting. It almost feels like a bit of a test drive, how you say, if you get the idea and you started planning straight off the idea, you're a bit worried that you would just plan and never actually start writing. So instead, you jump into the writing, explore that for however long you can, 2 or 3 chapters, and then go and do the planning. But that's such a great, I feel like that is such a great test drive of, does this story have enough to it? Am I interested enough in it to stick with it till the end? Like, I don't know. I think that's was that quite like a conscious process developing that like procedure?
It was learned, I think, definitely.
Yeah.
It was my first book in my Elmstone Saga series, Chosen, is the first story I ever finished that wasn't either fan fiction or a school assignment. And before that, I have hundreds of unfinished documents that are still sitting on hard drives and like my parents' house and here, stories that I just ran out of steam with, or they ran out of their own steam because maybe I approached them in ways that weren't very natural to me. So some of them I know I overplanned. Like, I started writing them, they became difficult. So I sat down and started writing more of like a treatment, and I still discovered how the story went, but then it never interested me to go back and do the work of actually writing the story, because I already knew how it ended, and I knew how those characters ended up together, or I knew how what the twist was going to be, and it just didn't matter to me anymore. And so those stories just got left behind. And to be honest, like, I was writing them when I was like 15 or whatever. Like, they're probably not very good anyway.
But I think this is something where, you know, people imagine writing as this like step-by-step process. Like, you get an idea, you do the outline, and then you follow the outline, you finish the book. And it's like, in reality, for most writers, like, obviously everyone is different, it's a lot messier. And it's like this circling back and forward between multiple different stages and steps and hats, from writing to researching to editing to thinking to outlining, then back to writing, and you just move through all these different things, and it's this collage of chaos, but then eventually you get to the end of it. But something I did want to ask is, just hearing you talk all about that writing process, what's your favorite part of writing? Is it the drafting, or is it once you're a little bit further into the book, like maybe you're on the 5th or 6th draft and it's just about polishing and tidying and prettying it up? Like, what part of writing is your favorite?
My favorite part of writing is when I think it's flow state is how other people who, like, I call it channeling, and I don't mean that in like a spiritual sense, but from reading what other creatives or highly productive people refer to as flow state, I suppose that's what it is. So my favorite part of writing, and this doesn't happen often enough, it's when I'm working on a scene that just starts happening and I'm actually so in it. This is a first draft, like this is a first drafting phase. I'm so deep in it that I feel like I'm there. And then suddenly someone, usually in the past it was my parents, now it's my husband, someone switches on a light and says, it's 8 p.m. and all the lights were off. I just got home. Are you okay? And I'm like, oh, I need to eat and go to the toilet because I haven't moved in 6 hours and my wrists hurt.
Wow. Yeah.
But it just like comes out like more than like 1,000 words an hour. And then when I go back later and I do my edit, and I'm quite harsh with myself in my edits, those scenes never seem to lose any content in the edit. Like they don't seem to need work. Like they just came through the way they were supposed to be, and the rest of the story kind of fits in somehow around these like perfect pieces of content.
So in those scenes, when the scenes that you sort of channel, to use your word, do they feel like, when you're reading back through it, do they feel different? Like they feel more alive than some of the other scenes? Because like you say, you don't have to really do much editing to them, if any.
They're just perfect. Like
that's amazing.
Well, to me, they're just perfect to me. As in, maybe it's particular characters too, or there's scenes that I've been like really looking forward to. I've been seeing them in my mind for a while, and then I get to them, and they might be quite long scenes, or they might be quite procedural scenes, but they're usually very atmospheric as well.
So they're always quite pivotal scenes. It's not like those those scenes that are sort of like the tissue between everything else. These are the more dramatic scenes.
They're more dramatic, or they're quite memorable. I feel like I can. One such scene that I refer to in my fourth book is what we call the ballroom scene, and people know like when I'm talking about the series, like what's the ballroom scene?
Is this Haunted, the fourth book?
Yeah, it is actually, but I think the scene is in Unbidden now that I think back.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah.
I was mixing up. Yeah, in Unbidden, sorry, in the third book, there is a I swear I've read these. I swear I wrote them and I know what I'm talking about.
You've definitely read them at least once.
At least once, yeah. Yeah. In the third book, the ballroom scene, we know like that was one of those scenes that has really colorful characters, is very atmospheric, it's quite memorable. It's not very action oriented, but we meet a few characters there, and my main character learns things that she didn't know before, and then from there the story can move in a new direction.
I totally agree with you that those types of moments don't happen nearly enough, where it feels like it's it's just happening in front of you and you are just dictating it. You're not like actively having to figure it out. It's just easy. And I totally agree. It doesn't happen often enough. I know with my book, Every Time He Dies, it happened twice in... I actually get confused about how long it took me to write that book. I'm not sure if it was 4 years or 7 years. I'm not even really sure.
Time.
It's a lot of mixed time. For someone who's, you spoke about how found family is one of your things you're obsessed with. Time is one of the things that I am obsessed with. And for someone who's obsessed with time, I have a very loose grip on how long it took to write that book. But it was... I remember so well that only 2 things came perfect the first time as dictation, and then everything else was hard work. I've listened to other people talk about how, they'll miss meals and they'll miss going to the bathroom because they're just so in the flow. And for a really long time, I just actually didn't get that. I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I've never missed a meal. Like, I know when it's lunchtime.
I usually do too.
Yeah, but when it does happen, it's pretty amazing. So is another, we know what your favorite part is. What's your least favorite part of the writing process?
Oh,
everything else.
editing,
Mm.
structural editing is
Interesting.
so
Okay.
painful. It's really
It is.
satisfying, especially when you get toward the end of it. But the first couple of times I had to do it, I really resented the process of what I saw as, like, when you're drafting, I see that as like being a gardener. And we've talked before about how in real life, like, I'm not really a gardener, like this poor plant.
Yep.
But I see your first draft, especially of of your debut book, is you like wandering out into this patch of dirt every day and dancing around, throwing seeds and just seeing where they land. And then something cool starts to grow. You don't know what it is. It might be an oak, it might be a pineapple.
Yep.
Who knows? But
Who
it's
knows?
growing there. It's growing right there. And it just grows. And then right next to it is some lavender and then some carrots. And it all just grows where it grows. And it has like this charming beauty
Yeah.
in it because you don't really know what you're doing. Sometimes when you're drafting, you're just,
Oh,
especially if
yeah.
you're like me, like I'm quite an organic writer. I like to let my characters lead at times. Like, I know where I need them to go, but I'm happy for them to take me there. And so at the end, you step back and you've created this thing of asymmetrical beauty. And then you know when you invite other people in that they're going to expect structure and they're going to expect uh, layers and levels to your garden, and they're going to expect a distinct lawn in the middle. And then you have to go around and make yourself pull up all these plants that you love, and some of them have to just go, and some of them have to be replanted somewhere else so that, for the aesthetic of what you're creating, because the writing process is for me as the writer, but the presentation of the ultimate garden that it creates is not for me, that's for the reader.
Yeah.
And they have to be able to get that gate open, not have a tree in the way. They have to be able to walk over and look at the fountain, not stand on a bunch of prickles. There's this process of having to tear up something that I've created, and it's becoming something I just notice has to be done, but also becoming less painful as I go along, probably for two reasons. One being that I'm never going to be as inexperienced a writer as I was when I wrote my first book, and that's going to continue to improve, and that I'm becoming a stronger editor at the same time. But the other reason being that as I progress through my series, the opportunity to throw seeds wherever I want is becoming less and less, because I'm drawing closer to a conclusion that has to be neat and tidy and satisfying. So with each book that I write, I actually get less opportunity to kind of flex and see where it goes. Like even though the story world is expanding, my options are becoming more limited because there's fewer books to tie up anything new that I introduce. So the structure of each book is getting tighter. So there's less that needs to be rearranged.
Is there going to be one more book in the saga, and then that's the
Yep.
final book that wraps up everything? Yeah.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes. And I have it here. I actually grabbed them.
Oh, good. Excellent. So you can see all the covers. Oh, you got all of them. That's fantastic.
I have them all. They're heavy.
They're big
There's
books.
my
Oh my
multi.
God. They're so beautiful when you have them all together.
They are really beautiful. They're my babies.
Yeah.
I love them. There's
They
enough
are.
room
They're
in my
so
hand for
nice.
just one more.
Yep. Soon the stack's just going to be even taller than you. But something I loved about that process that you were talking then about just then, it's like you're honoring both sides. You're honoring your own creativity by having that first like organic exploratory draft where you were just following the story. Obviously, we've talked about how you do have a bit of a plan, but you're also flexible with that plan and you're allowing yourself to just be creative with it. But then you're also acknowledging the fact that this is a product and it's a product consumed by readers and they're going to have expectations around what that should look like. But I also love that you're independently published, so you could publish whatever kind of book you wanted, but I love that you're honoring the tradition of storytelling and the reader and their expectations by meeting those expectations. So I like that you're doing both sides of that. But yeah. Something else I wanted to say in that is I agree that the structural editing is intense. See, I like the thought process of analyzing the draft I've written and creating a new plan to follow, like pulling the novel apart, and the fun thought experiments that can come about with how to fix it, like how can I make this better. I love that process of creating a new outline, but then applying that outline and then having to edit and restructure the novel is intense. Like, yes, I
Yeah.
definitely, yeah,
It kind of hurts.
it hurts. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's work and it feels like work. Yeah.
Yes, it's work,
Yeah.
and it's you're an editor as well, so
Yeah.
so you know that when you're providing suggestions for another person from an objective place, you are able to look at an imperfect manuscript and make suggestions with the reader in mind, and knowing that the suggestions you're making are for the benefit of the book itself and for the reader. But when you are the editor of your own book, as most writers should be in the first instance
Yeah.
before it passes over to an editor, no one is going to love this book as much as the author. And if you really love it, I think you need to present the best version of it to the next person before they have the chance to criticize it. As that person, there's a lot of opportunity to be quite hurt by yourself as the editor. Like, that self-indulgent scene where the characters get a chance to just talk about nothing.
Yes.
You know that it doesn't need to be there, but it was just so beautiful and just so fun to write, and you just want to share it, but it really doesn't have a place for the reader. And so you kind of have to just like carve it out of yourself.
Carve it out of your soul, out of your heart. But it's the worst when the scene isn't serving the novel in any sort of meaningful way, but it's really well written, or
Yes.
it's like either beautifully written or it's really entertaining. Like, it's fun. It's a fun scene. And you're just like, oh, I just can't keep it. Like, some of the stuff you can repurpose and you can sprinkle throughout in some other way, or you can send it to your email list as a short story. But
Yep.
sometimes like it's a bit mean, but I've got a file on my computer called orphans. It's my orphan file, and it's where it's where all those bits that I can't use, that have no place in the story anymore, they all just wind up in the orphan file. And
That is so organized, and I'm
yeah.
not at all surprised that you have an actual file. Mine are spread everywhere,
Yeah.
and that's a little bit of an issue for me, because I had the random brain spark like
Yeah.
18 months ago that I was going to use all my deleted scenes as and include them in my newsletter, my monthly newsletter. So people who subscribe to my newsletter also get sent a link to a deleted scene. So if they've already read the books, then they know where like those scenes came from, or how those scenes look now. So it's always fun to sort of like clean them up a little bit and make them available to people, and get their feedback. But they're not in any one organized place like yours is. So it's always a
Scramble
half-hour
around.
traipse through my through my folders trying to find it. I need to be more organized.
It's very easy to become unorganized. Like, I had a curiosity the other day. I just counted up how many Word files were involved in the writing of my latest manuscript, and it was like 35 Word documents. Like, because there's multiple, because every time I start a new version, I create a new Word document, because I don't want to risk losing something in the old one. And my Word crashes all the time. I need to stop using Word. I need to jump over to Scrivener or something. But I think it's amazing when you measure the volume of effort that goes into a book in that way. Like, I always mean to, as someone who's very type A and likes to measure things and look at analytics, I always intend to track literally how many hours I spend writing, but then that would be really intense. But also, writing is more than just writing. Like, even you were talking about how movement is a huge part of your creative process, like doing yoga and going for walks. But one of the questions I've been kind of obsessed with lately is actually getting writers to talk about their superpower, because so many of us are always focusing on our writing weaknesses, what we're not good at, and either trying to mask them or better them in some way. But to flip it on the positive, I'd love to hear what do you think your writing superpower is? What are you really, really good at with writing?
Oh, okay. So my writing weakness that I tell myself as a superpower is overwriting.
I like that you're managing to talk about both in the one thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a superpower. I can just turn anything into way more words than it needs to be.
Is that because you just go granular on the detail and you describe every single little thing? Is that why?
Maybe, yeah, maybe like when I go through an edit, I'm able to remove a lot of unnecessary words. I must put like a lot of double adjectives in. I managed to just remove a lot of those in my editing, and I'm often able to like compress scenes. But on my first draft, I definitely I overwrite everything.
Yeah.
Which is why my books are all really thick.
Yep.
that's
But perfect for
after I've edited.
fantasy. Sorry,
Yeah.
what did you say?
I said that's after editing, they're still really thick.
Yep.
I think my strengths are dialogue
Yep.
and characterization and using dialogue to drive scenes and to drive characterization. I think that's my strength. A lot of the storytelling that I engage in, like I read a lot, but I also watch a lot of like television, long running television genre. Oh, well, genre television, I should say. And in screen and in drama, dialogue is probably more powerful than what it is in text because it looks the same on the page. It just has quotation marks or doesn't. And I think it gets forgotten sometimes in text, and that sometimes when you're reading fiction where the writer maybe hasn't considered the physicality of their scene and the humanness of their characters in the same way, then in those instances, dialogue can come across really stiff or unnatural. And that's a big turn off for me when I'm reading. I read something that's supposed to be a romantic line, and it yeah, and if it doesn't sound like something a real person could say, I'm like, oh no, just take it away. I can't.
Totally. Nobody would ever actually say that. Yeah.
Yeah, like did this person actually say that, like read this aloud? Because if you can't read your dialogue back to yourself with a straight face, it needs to go.
It needs to go. Totally. I think it it's a lot of work to get right, but if you can read your dialogue without attribution, without dialogue tags, and you can tell which character is speaking, that's when you know you've nailed it.
I think so. Yeah. Everyone should sound different, and that is particularly true of dialogue, but also in terms of perspective and point of view.
Yeah.
I think so. My series is predominantly told in first person by my protagonist, and she's, to begin with, quite, it's mean for me to say an empty vessel, but she doesn't kind of bring a lot to the table to begin with. So she's kind of our vessel as readers into my magical world. And then as the story progresses, like we see the couple of traits that she has at the beginning, like she's a little bit stubborn and she's a little bit lazy.
That's an interesting quality for a protagonist. Yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't want to do anything that can be done in an easier way. Like she doesn't want to, so she balks at things that require a lot of effort, and she's quite easily put off by other people doing better than her. But then every third chapter of my series moves into third person perspective of one of the other characters who are all adults.
Yeah.
So that's how I expand the story world beyond what she knows, beyond her experience. And it's also been great for me to practice taking on different voices, because those adult characters, even though they're a lot more worldly and a lot more knowledgeable, they're also colored by their bias and their own life experiences. So where the protagonist is quite idealistic, they can be quite the opposite, like quite negative in their thinking, and that doesn't just come across in their dialogue, that comes across the way that their chapter assesses situations, which in the previous chapter, from the protagonist's point of view, might have been seen as a good thing. We then shift over into the perspective of a Middle Eastern sorcerer in his 50s who's a parent of 4, and they're not seeing that situation as being a great opportunity at all. They're seeing that as being really inconvenient.
And do you find, like, obviously it makes the story more complex, writing different point of views. Do you find that it also keeps it fresher for you? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it does. The lead character, Aristea, is, I really love her. Like, she's my creation, and a lot like me in a lot of respects,
Yeah.
as all protagonists, I think, are in some way connected to their author. But she even frustrates me. Like, I've grown a lot faster than she has, and the story would not be as fun for me to write if I could only ever talk through her.
Yeah.
Partly because of how little she can't be everywhere at once.
No, she only has access to this much of the story. Yeah.
Yes, and she's growing, like, as the story goes along. So she's, at this point, she's still 18, and I began the story before that for myself when I started the story when I was 16, and I thought 18 seemed really grown up.
Yeah.
So so I wrote this character, and then I've outgrown her, and I still have to make decisions for her through an 18-year-old lens, and I find that frustrating at times. But then also I wanted to write a natural progression of upskilling. So I wanted this girl to, sorry, in the beginning of the first book, I wanted her to be kind of useless. I just wanted her to be a normal girl who gets swept up into the magic world. And then I wanted a progression of knockback and opportunities and threats, and I wanted a learning curve. I didn't want a montage where suddenly she knows how to beat everyone up, and now she's got all the magic skills. Even by book 5, she's kind of, because of her inherent laziness, she hasn't gathered as much magical skill as maybe some of her peers, but she's in more dangerous situations than what they are. So she kind of has maybe 4 or 5 skills that she has really nailed, and she can really only do those things. Whereas when I shift over into the adult characters, they often have completely different skill sets. So I can have them teleporting, I can have them reading minds, I can have them gaining information or being agents within the story in different ways than what Aristea can be.
And I think it's so great to have a character who isn't like this idealized version of self, or this like ideal human being that's actually a work in progress. Like, they are really trying to develop skills, and then it's just so much more relatable. And I think that's doubly good when you want that character to be a vessel for the reader into the story. Like, they have to actually be relatable in that way. Because if they were just a superhero, then you're immediately already disconnected.
Yes, and that was important to me as well, because I was writing for a young adult audience. I was an avid reader as a teenager, and I read as much as what I could for my age, but then also for adult as well, like just whatever I could get my hands on. A trend that I noticed, and it still exists in young adult fiction, is a tendency to focus on matching up the main character with their love interest very, very quickly, upskilling the main character so that they're now totes awesome and in love, and now they're 18 and they've solved all the problems of their world, and they're a hero, and that's the end of their adventures. And as nice and ideal as that is to aspire to as a teenager, I also think it's really disheartening, because I was reading these books as a 16-year-old and thinking, like, I haven't had a boyfriend, I'm never going to succeed at life.
I haven't developed all these skills. Yeah,
and I'm not the best at anything right now. Like, how can I possibly ever be a success if I don't have 2 things? I've only got 2 years.
No pressure. Yeah. But I think that's so amazing to be self-aware that those are the internal conversations that were happening when you were reading this fiction, noticing that that is an issue, and then writing fiction that's like fixing, or like you're identifying a gap, and then you're writing your own novel to fill it.
Yeah, I'm kind of resisting in some ways what was kind of disempowering for me as a teenager. And not that all my readers are teenagers, but they're one of my audiences, and I don't want my work to be part of a sort of a broader societal message that there's something wrong with them if they aren't meeting these supposed expectations. So yeah, one way for me to resist that was to write Aristea as more of a sidekick. She's not a prodigy. She's really just in the right place at the right time. And she is very talented, but for the most part, she hasn't tapped into those talents at the time that we meet her. And she's guided into finding how to leverage those talents against people who have been working on theirs for a lot longer than she has. She's surrounded by people who are more skilled, or in other cases more powerful, and in both authoritative and magical ways than what she is. And I'm still writing a story where she is finding ways to empower herself within those structures and within those relationships. And the other aspect of the stories that were important to me to write was not to romantically entangle my two leads.
Yeah.
So Aristea very quickly connects with this guy Renatus. He is the sorcerer's prodigy. So he's more powerful than anyone else elite council has met, and there are sort of equal parts awe and fear of what might become of him. And when she becomes his apprentice, everything kind of devolves from there. And they have great chemistry. I really love writing them together. But it was important to me that they weren't just a romantic match. And I've found as a writer that I really enjoyed writing male-female platonic relationships. And they kind of feature across nearly everything that I've written, both my series and my unpublished works at this time all feature these relationships, which I think are more reflective of the bonds that we make. Like most people in our lives that we love and who leave impact on our lives in meaningful ways are not our romantic partners.
Yeah, totally. That's a dynamic you only have with one other person, even though it might occur many times across your life. It's only ever, I shouldn't say it's only ever with one person. Obviously there's different models for it, but for the most part, the bulk of your relationships are not romantic. It's such a brave thing to do, to not engage with that trope of the genre. If you have a male lead and a female lead, when these two significant people meet for the first time in a book, it instantly plants the seed, like, okay, we're invested in this. Eventually this is going to become romantic because this is the trope we have seen over and over and over again. So one, were you ever worried that readers would push back at you not fulfilling this trope? And two, what have been readers' responses to it? Do they really love this aspect and that they're just platonic friends?
They do now.
Because it's clear that it's not going to progress.
So now they do, and now also the cast has grown enough that the characters have interesting and complicated relationships with other people outside of their bond, which fulfills some of those other aspects, even if they're not romantic either. And so the reader and audience response has kind of evolved as the books have progressed, as the series has progressed. But I do worry about reader pushback against tropes, partly because before and between writing these books, I've always played a lot in fan fiction, where readers have a instantaneous and very direct way of impacting the story through direct feedback after each chapter. And many of my stories that I've written that way have definitely been like a community construction, in that I would write a chapter and have platonic characters and then get 17 reviews of people saying, like, when are they going to get together? And then it's kind of on me to reply to that, like, well, they're not, or well, maybe, like, I'll see where it goes. And to kind of negotiate that, because I want to keep those readers and I want to keep them happy, and I'm feeding my ego here, so I want them to say nice things. But I'm also heading somewhere particular with that story. So I know that when given the opportunity, that readers can be very vocal about where they'd like to see certain relationships or certain story pathways go. And that's not a bad thing. I really enjoy that dynamic. But with novels, when you're publishing them in in the novel format, you don't get that feedback until after the book is already out. So you're not getting it as you're writing, you're waiting until it's all done, it's prepackaged, you send it out, and then people go, oh, I wish this had happened.
Yeah. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's too late. It's done.
Yeah.
It is a fixed product. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. With wrapping the series up, like what are you looking, how do you feel? You must have really mixed feelings, like an excitement for it to be complete, but then also this letting go of this project that's been a huge part of your adult life.
It has. It's actually spanned since I first met these characters in the form that they were before. Like they've evolved a lot. It's taken probably like half my life to get to this stage. Yeah, I do have a little bit of sadness when I think about it too much. Like I think, oh, I'll miss these characters. I'll miss being able to visit them. And but that's not the main feeling. Like mainly I'm excited to get this last story and to see how good I can make that, and then to sort of set that free on my readers and to get their reactions. That's what I'm excited for.
Because I think 6 books, it'll be an interesting creative challenge, like wrapping that all up in one book.
Oh,
I think,
yeah.
I can well imagine that that's going to be like every book has its challenge, and I think that'll probably be the one for book 6.
Yeah, I've tried not to think about that too much.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So, can you tell us a little bit about Fractured and what can readers expect from this book?
Okay, so Fractured is the 5th book in my Elmstone book series. Hang on. There it is.
Yep.
Shell.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So it's a bit of a departure from the rest of the series, which has, and that's kind of what the title is representative of. Relationships have been kind of redirected. Perceptions that we had on good or bad characters are being repositioned. There are a lot of ideas that are set up in the first 4 books that are, first of all, I guess, introduced to the readers. Like we have the main character, we have characters that she thinks are good guys and characters she decides are bad guys. And then as the world kind of opens up to her and to the reader, we start to see things blurring and things becoming a little more grey, and ideas of censorship are explored through magical lore and the opposition of different styles of magic and ideas around what it means to be magical in a contemporary world post witch burnings and book burnings and things like that, and about, I suppose, control of who decides who gets to be magical, who decides what that looks like, and who's allowed to know about that. So in Fractured, this is the second last book of the series, a lot of those ideas get kind of cracked, and my characters who have been working in parallel toward a common goal end up separated for the first time, and then are working separately toward those goals in the best ways that they can. So it was a different writing experience for me. I think it's been different for my readers as well, because the Aristea and Renatus relationship, which is kind of the core of the saga, that platonic master and apprentice bond, is increasingly intense across the first 4 books, to a point that in my magic system, parts of their personality and their traits as sorcerers start to blend across to the other person, and their identities are kind of being compromised. And then their separation in the 5th book, I think, ran the risk of being a little bit like alienating for readers, but all the responses have been extremely positive, which is great because both characters care enough about the other person that they're never really that far from their thoughts or their choices. And yeah, I think it sets up for my 6th book, where some of these issues are going to be resolved, maybe not in ways that either the characters or the readers are expecting.
Final question I'd like to ask you, and I hope this doesn't seem like a lazy question, but is there anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't talk about, or anything you'd like to say that we didn't get to unpack?
Not really. Nothing's coming to my mind. No.
All right, great. And if people wanted to find out more about you, where can they go? And where can they go to get Fractured, which I might add only came out in July. So it's a very new release. So where can people go to get the book, and where can they go to find out more about you?
So the books are available online through all the usual distributors. You can visit my website, which is shaylamorgansen.com, and through there you're able to click through from the books pages to be able to order signed paperbacks as well, if that's your preference, but also to get through to the usual online platforms. I'm not as active on social media as perhaps I should be, but I try to be on Instagram and Facebook pretty frequently. So it's Shayla Morgansen, author for Facebook, I think. But mostly I'm on Instagram, which is Shayla Writes Magic.
Thank you so much, Shayla. And if everybody could go and grab a copy of Fractured, I'm sure Shayla would be very appreciative. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Stay safe, stay calm, and keep writing, because the world actually does need more books.